What's going on, everybody? We're back. We got episode number, I think, 28 of the Club and Sub podcast. Really getting up there this year. And anyway, so tonight we got myself at John Sargarian MMA, at MMA Fox, Luke at SWR_betting. Quinn is going to be here briefly to give his bets out. He's at Orthodox 1993. And C is training right now. He should be done in about 15 minutes and supposed to hop on. But you guys know C. Lags, go give him some shit. Lags left his iPad at work. So he will not be on tonight, like a dick. But anyway, Luke and I are going to go and break down last week's bets. But before that, Quinn's got to get out of here. So I'm going to let him just run through real quick what he's got.
So real quick, I have so far I have one unit on Roque Martinez at plus 190. I'm also looking at playing his KO prop and possibly the over. I think whoever got that fight starts round 2 at minus 115. I think that's like one of the best bets of the year. Like that's just an insane, like insanely crazy line to me. So to break down the fight, like I just don't really think Mays is that good. Like he's very, very hittable at range. He kind of just dies after 3 to 5 minutes. And what you can really count on Martinez to do, he's got an elite chin. And he's going to walk you down. He's going to pressure you. He's going to throw in volume. He's going to clinch you up. He's going to mix in his wrestling. Like he's just going to be more active and be in there. And really, like for Mays, I just think that's just a kind of a bad stylistic matchup for him there. So I just think he's higher than 34% implied here. So I really had no problem playing Martinez at a plus 190, and the line could even get better. I also have 2 units on Sean Strickland at minus 115. I kind of just think it's a bad matchup for Allen. I mean, Allen's not just going to be able to go in there and bully Strickland around. Like Strickland's going to be able to pop his jab and pop his 1-2 and rip the body. There's a pretty big speed advantage on the feet for Strickland here, and Allen, he likes to walk you down and grab a hold of you and make the fight dirty. And I just don't think that Strickland's going to let him do that, And also Strickland's not going to look to grapple here. Holland, like he has kind of an ego issue. Like he likes to beat people at their own game kind of. And he was willing to engage Allen in the grappling there, which I thought was kind of a mistake on his part. Same with Dawkins. I mean, when Dawkins was on the feet, he was lighting Allen up. I'm making the fight close, but he was the one that was going for takedowns and landing takedowns when I felt like he should have just been keeping this on the feet. Strickland's not going to do that. He's going to just keep it at range and really just pick Allen apart here. And, I might be, underplaying Allen's athleticism and his ability to get the fight to the mat. But Strickland, he's a solid black belt. He has 81% takedown defense. Most everyone struggles to get him down. So I don't really think that even if Allen gets him down, I don't think it's just a wash that Allen just like lays on top of him and pressures him. I mean, Allen, he makes lots of mistakes on the mat too. We've seen him get his back taken. We've seen him lose position going for subs. We've seen him go for heel hooks and not look to sweep just to stay on his back. And I think if he kind of just gets into that position versus Strickland, he's just going to get his face punched in. So, I think at minus 115, it's kind of a must play on Strickland for me. I'm looking into Marquez sub at a plus 350. You could have got it as high as plus 400. I think Safarov is live here, but I don't like how Safarov just doesn't set up any of his takedown entries. And he's just kind of wild and sloppy fighter in general. And Marquez has a really, really good guillotine. He's got a solid Kimura, and I just think he's kind of a better grappler in general. So I'm kind of looking at that and maybe RDA by decision. I think it's what is the line right now? I think it's plus 200, plus 110. Do you guys have it?
I think it's plus 110.
Yeah, plus 110. I'm looking at that. I just don't know how Felder's going to look on short notice, cutting all that weight, and Felder looks like a tank at the weight class. I'm going to keep it short. So yeah, that's it. Those are my bets. I think it's going to be a really good card. Let's catch some bets here.
All right, guys. All right, Quinn, thanks for stopping by. We will have him back here next week and maybe Saturday.
Peace out, Quinn.
Later, Quinn. All right, so here we go. We're live. Luke and I just going to see should be joining us in about 15 minutes or 10 minutes. But again, Lag's not joining us. He's in the chat because he's a dick and left his iPad at home or at work. But yeah, we're going to real quick go through last week, and then we will get right to it. Luke, you want to start?
Yes. So interesting kind of week. It was a week where I was kind of trying to look in. It was one of those weeks where there just wasn't a ton that just stood out to me overtly. So I kind of do a little bit of digging. First bet on Andre Arlovsky, 1 unit at plus 220. Once again, I've always been a huge proponent of 2020 Arlovsky. Just think the guy gets a bit of a bad rap if you're kind of just running down his sheet over the last 5 years. But the guy's evolved his game. It was going to be kind of one of those low volume point fighting type of fights, which I thought obviously favored Arlovsky to not get knocked out, where Boser was going to pick and choose his spots. And once again, being low volume, it was going to be a close fight. And it turned out that, all three judges gave it 29-28 Arlovsky, which I was obviously cool with. But I think you could also make the case that, Boser went around in there too. So is what it is. Definitely happy with it at plus 220. I'm kind of mad I didn't get the best of it because that line definitely rocketed up a little bit. Also played the over 2.5 there for 2 units at minus 130. That's when I'm just really regretting not going heavier on, because I think it's probably the best read I had on the card. But I guess kind of the whole heavyweight narrative, I guess, played into it a little bit for me, even despite my read of not going heavier, but that cashed. To the 2 L's on the night, I had 1.5 units on De Lima at plus 235. Really botched this line. Obviously, he skyrocketed up to like plus 400. Did not anticipate the line movement at all. My big thing was it was more so of a questions answered kind of fight for me. I just wasn't necessarily sold on Romanov. And I think, even in the Romanov backer side that, people thought one takedown, the fight was going to be over. De Lima showed that, he could get back to the feet and, definitely mix it up on the feet when there as well. So to me, I guess I more so regret the bet in the sense that I went 1.5 units on it and I botched the line, where I also had a small little flyer on him by KO round 1 at plus 900. I think that's probably how I should have just made my official play and just kept it that way, because I still wasn't necessarily sold on the fight getting out of the first round to begin with. And I think that was probably, the best win condition there for De Lima. So a bit of a bummer on that. And then I pulled the trigger late on Barcelos Taha under 2.5 rounds. If you guys watched the stream live, I baited all these guys into a bit of a Cokes drunk live bet there. But, it was one of those fights. It was high action. But at the end of the day, I didn't give enough credit to Taha in terms of his submission defense. I thought, once Barcelos decided to take the fight down, I thought he would be able to finish him. But then again, didn't give enough credit to Taha. So it is what it is. Ended the night, slight profit of 0.24 units, but yeah, it wasn't the greatest night. Had a few good reads, couple bad reads, couple pokes. It is what it is. But I definitely like this week for sure.
Yeah, awesome. I had a lot of the same plays you did, but yeah. So I started with Griffin and Ibrahimov. Had 2 bets here. Had 1 unit on Ibrahimov sub round 1 plus 1100. Unfortunately, it's hard to get submissions when you don't attempt a single takedown over 15 minutes. The guy goes from being fucking pathologically aggressive to deciding he's a kickboxer. Okay. And then I also played, though, Griffin for 2 units plus 125 in round 3 or by decision. And that, I think, was a pretty good play. He clearly had him completely outclassed on the feet. The big question was whether or not Griffin could defend the grappling. But when you make it that easy, it's not that hard. Though, brutal fucking way to end that fight. That was one of the worst things I've ever seen in my life. But, yeah, I ended up, making out of the profit there. And then I had Elkins for 4 units minus 196 against Garagori. And it got sweaty for a bit in the second round, but pretty much like what I said on the pod last week, there was a massive discrepancy in the grappling here. And if you looked at Elkins pretty much his entire career, whenever he's had a significant grappling edge, he's completely dominated those opponents. And that's pretty much what happened here. He stood for a little too long with Garagori in round 2, but round 3, he got right back to the grappling after he got tagged and he submitted him. So I was happy about that. And then, you said you were upset about 1.5 units on De Lima. How about 3 units on De Lima plus 250? Because that's about what I had here. Not great. Look, I do think De Lima was the value side, even so, but bottom line is I put 3 units on him because I capped him as a favorite, and that's clearly was wrong. I would say in hindsight, Romanov should have been in the minus 200 or 250 range. I still think 500 was a bit wide, and I'm going to be real curious if he does fight Tybura again to see what that line comes down at. But, yeah, I mean, my capping of the fight was off, even if I still think the closing line was a little wide. And then I played Gadelha at plus 118, again, shit line for 2.5 units against Jan Zanan. And, I was a little want to agree with everybody about, what Claudia is at this point. I thought she had shown decent cardio against Hill, but we basically saw it. When she grapples heavy, she's a one-round fighter. It's pretty unfortunate. This is a bet. I don't know if I regret it. I do to some degree. I do to some degree regret betting her just because we've seen this before. But Jan's really good. She gave more resistance than I thought, even when she was on her back. And yeah, I'll never bet Claudia again. Back-to-back weeks, Bobby Green, Claudia Gadelha, completely off the list. I just won't trust them. And then I was on with you on Arlovsky, Luke. I had a plus 240. And again, the closing line closed a lot wider, which was pretty odd to me. It just seemed like a pretty high variance kickboxing match. And then last bet of the night, I actually kind of wish I went heavier, which is easy to say in hindsight. But Glover Teixeira I had for 2 units at plus 200. I mentioned it on the pod, but I said there was a decent chance that he would look like a favorite here. And sure enough, Glover did look like a favorite here. And yeah, I'm not shocked at it. So yeah, it was a nice night. Went plus 4.5 units. Good bounce back. Was nice to beat Doc on some of those last couple fights there. Hopefully we'll do it this week. See, you want to touch on last week at all? Or you want to jump right into this week?
Yeah, we could just jump on in.
All right. I'll start with you then. Roque Martinez, Dontel Mays. Any opinions?
Yeah, I played Martinez. Just, it's a heavyweight fight. Martinez is pretty tough, comes forward. Mays, made Nascimento striking look pretty good. It's more of just a fade on Mays, to be honest. I'm not uber confident, but plus 200 in a fight where I think Martinez is a little bit more durable, I'll take it. I mean, he comes forward for heavyweight. I mean, he's at a clear size disadvantage, but I think he could throw and make it dicey the longer the fight goes.
Luke, what do you got?
Yeah, so I definitely don't hate the Martinez play either. It's definitely a play I'm considering as well for the points that C touched on, that he's just going to come forward and spam volume. But the play I did make earlier this afternoon, I put 2.5 units on the over 1.5 at minus 170. Definitely a little chalky for a heavyweight fight, but my big reasoning here is I just think both guys have shown to be pretty durable, even despite defensive issues. It's kind of one of those dichotomous weird things because both guys get hit. But I mean, even if you looked at the Gane fight, the amount of punishment that Mays was able to take there is pretty unreal. I think you replace Dontel Mays with X number of heavyweights at that caliber, at least. They're getting finished 80 to 90% of those occasions. And then in Martinez, I think the level of competitions he's fought has been relatively stiff. But then again, even in that Romanov fight, I mean, he showed at least toughness on the ground. Once again, similar to the comparison I guess I just made to Dontel Mays, where he put a lot of other heavyweights in that situation. I think they're also getting finished. The guy is a guy who will walk forward and take shots, but he will also keep his guard up too at times. He's not a complete punching bag per se. And I think, Dontel Mays is one of those guys who I think has, some athletic tools, but I just don't think he's really put his game together all that well. So I think, it'll be one of those more actually high action type of fights where just really nobody goes out. And the over 1.5, I think, hits at a pretty decent clip here. Actually, regardless of the stats here, the stats would actually favor the under. But this is one of those occasions where I'm willing to concede the stats just based on the stylistics. So yeah, I think it's a solid play.
Yeah, I have no play here personally at the moment. I'm thinking of playing Roque. I haven't fully decided on that yet. I do like the fact that he goes forward, and that's obviously that's a big part of winning rounds, going forward and throwing output. My problem is, and it's not to take a contrarian take to you, Luke, but it's I think Roke's super hittable, and he's going to force like heavy exchanges, which scares me like a little bit because I do think Mays, hits reasonably hard. But yeah, like I don't have a strong lean either way. Like I agree with you, Mays, massive athleticism edge here, but if as you and Quinn as well, like both suppose, like they're both durable and this is likely to go a long way. I do think Roke's forward pressure is likely going to probably be the difference if it comes to going to the scorecards here. But yeah, no strong lean yet. I have to look at it more to be honest. So we move forward. We go to the next fight. We got Freitas, Geraldo Freitas taking on Tony Gravely. And I made a play here. I played one unit on Freitas plus 156. He's 130 at the moment. I actually still kind of think that's a decent line, to be completely honest. Basically, we saw Gravely. Now, look, am I going to say Freitas is as good a wrestler as Brett Johns? I'm not sure about that, but he is, for as far as Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu guys go, he is a pretty good wrestler, and he'll attempt takedowns in volume. And, we've seen it happen to Gravely a couple times. The guy was a very good college wrestler, but, he got dominated regionally by Marab. Now, again, that's fair. It's Marab. But then it happened again against Brett Johns. Now, he didn't get dominated in that fight, but Johns got him down pretty much at will. And what he did show and what ultimately ended up getting him submitted was the fact that the guy gives his back to get up every single time. And, ultimately for me, that's a huge concern against the Freitas, who attempts a ton of takedowns here. And I think it's a given. If the fight plays out for any length of time, I think it's a given Freitas is going to land takedowns. And I would guess, I could be wrong, I would guess Grav is going to try to avoid the grappling because I do think he's got the better hands here. But if Freitas can land takedowns, he's going to have the ability to take the back and possibly submit him or hold him there. Ultimately, my big concern here and why I didn't play it right away when it was up by plus 170 is that I've seen Freitas do a lot of stupid shit and sacrifice position a lot. But, he is a black belt. He's clearly a good submission grappler. And I just ultimately think the opportunities are going to be there for him to submit Gravely. And so at plus 156, I'm happy to take the flyer. Luke, what do you got?
So I guess a bit of a contrarian take. I don't hate anybody taking the play on Freitas, I guess, kind of on that earlier line. Just because he's one of those guys I kind of classify as, a Sergio Moraes in a sense, a guy who's kind of confident in his jiu-jitsu, so he's just going to let his hands go. And that's not to say his hands are bad or anything, but those guys are always just really dangerous in a sense to bet against because of that consideration. But at the same time, if their best consideration doesn't come, they're also very beatable too. So I guess my big thing is I'm actually going to kind of strongly disagree here. I don't think Freitas takes Gravely down. I think Gravely takes Freitas down, and I actually think he can be defensively responsible to avoid submissions. But my issue is that Gravely has also found himself consistently in submission attempts, which I think it's got him finished 4 out of his 5 wins, but he's also found himself in a lot of those submission attempts and avoided them. In saying that, I'm not betting Tony Gravely here either, but I think it is one of those spots where I think he can be defensively responsible and on the feet. Honestly, I kind of think it's a bit of a toss-up. So I think we will see Gravely look to get this fight down. And with Freitas, as you kind of touched on, he is a guy who will kind of sacrifice position for submission at times. So I think that definitely favors Tony Gravely, but once again, it's I definitely understand the steam towards Freitas just because of those considerations of, the dude's got like 25 fights in like the last 5 years or so, and I just haven't really seen much evolution in terms of him being able to avoid at least those submission attempts, which definitely is a concern in terms of a chalky play on Gravely. But one I am considering is the decision line on him. I think it's like plus 130 right now. With all the steam that's came in on him recently, I'm curious to see if that bumps up a little bit to that like plus 150 type number. And I will be intrigued for sure. But it's not really a fight I'm clamoring to play necessarily, but I'm going with Gravely.
See, how about you?
Yeah, I don't have super strong opinions. I thought 55-45 either way is probably fair. Yeah, with Johns, John's just a tough son of a bitch. The guy could he makes things dicey, right? I mean, he just fucking tough out no matter what. But Gravely, I mean, he's found himself in some unfavorable, some submission attempts. But I do tend to agree with Luke that Gravely is probably going to look to take it to the mat. I don't think there's a clear edge on the feet really either way. I just kind of think it's a toss-up, and ultimately it just comes down to Gravely giving up his back, in my opinion. Either he's going to get backpacked for a few minutes, lose a round, or it's just going to be him on top and it's going to be close. So I don't have super strong opinions. I just kind of think it's 55-45. If you think he's going to get his back taken, then go for it. But, nothing super clear here. No plays.
All right, so we move on to another fun fight where I think we got some opposing views here. We got Randa Marcos taking on UFC debutant Kanako Morata. Luke, you want to take a shot here to start?
Yeah, so honestly, it was a fight that I should say in the original iteration of Kanako Morata facing Lavinia Souza, I was going to have a very big bet on Mrs. Morata, but obviously that got canceled. We got the rebooking for Marcos. Not a fight I guess I was originally looking to play, but I did end up making a small play on Morata for a unit at -170 here. And largely my big reasoning is I only focused on, I guess, a handful of fights here, just because, at least in terms of Marcos, there's only so many girls that have really shot or attempted takedowns on her in decent volume. So with that, I think you have to look at the Randa Marcos Carla Esparza fight. And if you go back and look at that fight, I think that actually probably gives decent credence to Marcos backers if you're on that side. But at the same time, I think that's also Randa Marcos is one of her best performances that she's ever had in 15 UFC fights. And even in that, when Carla Esparza really committed to takedowns, I'd say about 60% of the time on those real committed takedowns, she got it and got decent amount of control time. And so with that, obviously we know what the game plan of Morata is going to be. It's going to take her look to take her down. She's a Chinese wrestling champion. She's definitely a little undersized for the weight class, standing at 5'1", but the girl is a bull. I kind of like to compare her to like an Alicia Zapatella from Invicta. If my boy Joe Sunsu, the WMMA whisperer, is in here, I know he loves him some Alicia Zapatella, the half pint. But ultimately, I think she is able to get this fight down with consistency and actually be able to avoid subs. The one concern I had was, especially in that Emily Ducati fight, Emily Ducati was able to move her hips and get to armbar positions quickly. And we have seen Randa Marcos secure armbars and whatnot before, but I think she has shown decent posture. And if you want to actually go back to Emily Ducati real quick, the girl actually does come from a wrestling background, is a brown belt in jiu-jitsu as well. So, I'm honestly, I'm pretty high on this Morata girl. I don't think her striking is like overtly great, but because she threatens those takedowns and feints in doing so, I think it opens up her hands a little bit. So she can at least land on the feet and be semi-competitive there. Granted, if she's not able to land takedowns on Randa Marcos here, I think Randa Marcos wins this fight on the feet, not by a massive margin, but I do think that. But I do think Kanako Morata is going to be able to land takedowns and get into dominant positions here, and be able to win on top time. We even saw in that Carla Esparza Randa Marcos fight as well. Carla was able to get into an arm triangle in that second round. Might have been able to finish her if time was proceeding, and we've seen that be a patented submission from Morata as well. And honestly, Randa Marcos is just a girl I don't want to have my money anywhere near. She's clearly proven to be a head case. She's admitted even today in an interview with Aaron Bronstetter that she thought that Mackenzie Dern was hurt. That's why she jumped on her. I'm sorry, but this girl, she has a lobotomy essentially at this point in her career. I don't think you can trust her, but I definitely think there is a case there to be made for her in this fight. I'm just not convinced she stays upright, and I think she gets grounded out.
See, how about you?
I actually didn't look into this, so pass.
All right. I bet Marcos. I played a unit and a half on her at +150. I mean, I don't disagree with a lot of what you said, Luke. Like, I bet her against Dern last fight, and
I did too.
yeah, I wanted to put a bullet in my brain after the fight for trusting her to be intelligent. But I do think, look, so I guess I'll take it from a Morata perspective in that, like, look, obviously Morata's a solid wrestler. I don't think outside of that, though, she does a whole lot at a high level. Not that she does, like, I wouldn't say her striking's at a bad level, but I don't think it's like anything special. Like, I do trust Randa's boxing a bit more. In terms of her jiu-jitsu, I think she's a bit – I wouldn't say it's on the level of Brendan Allen where she's getting swept out of position, but, like, she's getting, like – she's a little overzealous in trying to advance position, and it's cost her and allowed her opponents, like, fairly low-level regional opponents to get up at times. I do like how aggressive she is, but I think, like, even when you look at the wrestling, like, you look at Randa's fight with, say, Carla, I think Morata's entries might be a bit faster than Carla's, but I do think Carla is more effective in establishing position than she is. And, Randa did a pretty good job scrambling that fight and did a pretty good job sprawling. And, it's weird. It's like, if she can do that here, I actually do think she wins the fight at a decent clip. Not, like, at a favorite clip, but, like, I'll put it this way. I think standing, I'd give Marcos a significant edge. The thing is, I do expect Morata's going to land a couple takedowns here, which obviously is going to look good in the judge's eyes. And so I kind of think I don't think Morata can hold her down. That's, I guess, where I'm coming from here. And if she can't hold her down, I think it's going to end up being like fairly greasy and fairly close in every round, and just kind of one of those fights where the judges have to decide what they value, 2 takedowns in a round versus, one girl clearly winning the striking. And with that being the case, I kind of lean Marcos. And I also, you just look back, and I'm not trying to shit on Morata. Like, there have definitely been worse prospects to come over from Invicta and Ryzen. But the level of competition she's fought has just been so low that's like, I expect she will get takedowns here. But would it really be completely stunning if she comes in and it turns out, her game and her size just don't translate to the UFC at all and she gets washed out? I don't think so. And, like, Randa on the other side, like, I know she got tapped by Dern, but let's be honest, women's grappling hasn't caught up to men's grappling yet. Like, Dern is super, super high level. Like, nobody else has really washed out Randa in her career, and she's faced a very, very high level of competition. So it's hard for me against a debutante to think that Randa should be worse than like 50% here. So that's kind of my lean. Like, I think it's a 50-50 fight. Wouldn't shock me if Morata wins. I do think, though, it's going to go to a decision. And so, yeah, my lean's Marcos. I have a unit and a half on her plus 150. And next fight, we have another fun one. I don't know if anybody's got to play here. Luis Smolka, Alberto Quinones. You got anything here, C?
What fight?
Smolka Quinones.
No, nothing.
Luke?
Yeah, I actually just kind of finished this one up before we jumped on. I guess I was a little bit more on the Smolka truther side, like post alcoholism. And I played him against Kenny. And I know we're gonna be on a slightly different agreements there in that fight, John, because I think he fucked up in that fight, and I know I think you think he thought he looked good in that fight, but I guess what I will say for Techo is he's a guy who's just extremely undervalued. I think, in my opinion, over the course of his career, like, I don't think he's like top 15 guy, but in general, he's just a tough, well-rounded guy, decent jiu-jitsu, is going to scrap it out on the feet. Smolka, where I actually think Smolka's boxing has improved, but he's also one of these guys who's going to kind of entertain the scramble. So I'm curious to see if Techo does decide to take this fight down, how that kind of looks on the ground and really where it plays. Honestly, I'm not sure. I could see Techo controlling position. I could see Smolka sweeping on the feet. I think it's pretty back and forth, but I give the slight edge to Techo. So I think it's a close fight, but it's one of those ones where I think if you jumped in on kind of that Techo at plus 140 number, I think that was kind of the value side here. But I don't really have a strong read on the fight, to be honest. And I've seen a lot of Smolka plays too. I don't hate it because I think it's one of those fights where I think both guys could look potentially, minus 150, minus 200, given particular upsides. But I think the I think the value is actually on the dog and Techo.
Yeah, I mostly agree with you. Kind of like I just posted on the screen, but kind of like what Kugabe said. Yeah, I actually didn't hate how he looked against Kenny. Like I thought there were things he could have done different, but how aggressive he was and the kind of attritional work he was putting in, I thought would probably pay dividends the later the fight went. Especially, we even saw it a bit against Wood how Kenny's tank can go a bit when he's faced pressure. And like I like the approach to that fight. My big issue with Smolka is kind of, in some respects, the same thing it's always been. Like, he came forward and I did like that approach, but the guy is so hittable all the time. It's like unbelievable. Like Kenny, it wasn't a surprise that Kenny ended up hurting him and then subbing him. Like he was just there, he was going after the body, which I love, but it wasn't setting up shots to the body. It was kind of just putting your head down, marching forward, like just.
He didn't move his head.
Right, yeah, and just throwing combinations to the body. And like we've seen this from him before. Like you remember, I mean, it was a while ago, but before he got cut the first time, his fight with Matthias Nicolau, he got dropped I think 3 times in that fight. Basically the same thing, just wading into the pocket and looking to initiate big exchanges and getting hurt. And that's just that kind of defense. It's just hard for me to ever want to back at like favorite money. Quinones, I don't hate Techo. Like you look at the fight, the 2 fights he's lost 2 of his last 3. But it was Nathaniel Wood, where they were actually pretty competitive at range, and O'Malley, who completely washed him out. But other than that, he's had mostly competitive fights in his career. His metrics are pretty good. He's a reasonable defensive striker. His output's pretty solid. He attempts a fair amount of takedowns, and Smolka gets taken down a fair amount. Now on the mat, I do think, I think it would be ill-advised to take Smolka down, just because I think the jiu-jitsu differential is fairly significant here. But like, I don't know. Like saying all that, you'd think I think Techo's a side here. I agree he is the value side, but like I trust him to kind of win minutes. You know what I'm saying? Like, I think it'll be close, but I would lead him in terms of minutes. I do think there's fairly massive finishing upside in Smolka's favor, though. Like I think if one of them is going to be a knockout, it's probably going to be Smolka getting it, and I think he's got decent submission upside. And so it's like I kind of think the line's right, like minus 140, minus 150 thereabouts. I think it's kind of fair. Yeah, like I had been thinking about playing Techo, but the more I watch, the more I think about it. It's just like it's hard for me to imagine him finishing him, and so it's very hard, for me to like put a play there. So yeah, my pick's going to be Smolka, I guess, but I wouldn't bet him. I think it's going to be a pretty close fight. And we move on. We got Alex Morono, Reese McKee. Luke, you want to take us away?
Yeah, I originally thought I'd be having a play on Morono here, and I kind of changed my tune just a tad. I still favor Morono. I'm still picking Morono, but this McKee guy, I don't really think he's that bad, to be honest. And the issue I guess I've had with Morono historically is that he's obviously just very defensively flawed on the feet, but the one consideration I will give to him is in that Max Griffin fight, it looks like with, training at Freitas and Saif Saud, it looks like there was at least a conceded effort to be made to like tighten up his striking to some degree. Like he was speaking to him. He was having his hands up a little bit more. There were still lapses. Don't get me wrong, in that fight of, old school Alex Morono where he'd kind of wing big stuff. But, I think he's made a little bit of improvements. But then from there, then he goes and gets sparked in 27 seconds by Chaos Williams. But then again, that was also just kind of like a bull rush scenario. It's kind of hard to take a whole lot from that fight. So, but with McKee is like, even when he's been put down, like my big thing coming into it was I just think Alex Morono should wrestle. And I still think he should. But one thing we haven't really seen from Alex Morono with consistency is, I guess, him attempting takedowns. And then even on the ground, even when McKee has been taken down, he is pretty active off of his back. He's either, elbowing, he's looking to sweep, or he's looking to get back up. He even against in that Terry Brazier fight that he lost by unanimous decision, he was actually able to get some top time on Terry Brazier, who's at least regarded as a decent regional scene wrestler. So, I mean, he's a scrappy kid. And I think it needs to be noted too, that he's fought a large majority of his career at 155. He's coming up to 170, but I also don't think he's undersized necessarily. I kind of put him in kind of that James Vick category of 155, just a massive, really scrawny, long guy. I still think he's going to be, the bigger guy, quote unquote, than Morono. But ultimately, I kind of changed my tune a little bit. I don't feel confident in laying at least that kind of juicy, chalky price on Morono here. It'd be one thing if he had the Max Griffin performance where I'm seeing like some conceded improvements in his game, or at least conceded improvements that he's trying to make in his game. And then, he has a nice little follow-up performance from that. But like I said, he went out and got starched in 30 seconds. So to me, it's a little bit difficult to see where he's at. And at least when we talk about from a dog perspective and a guy who's going to fight for your money, Reese McKee will fight for your money. So I think that's something that needs to be said, but it's a fight I'm probably staying away from.
See anything here?
Yeah, pass.
Yeah, I had initially looked into McKee and possibly playing him. A lot of what you said, Luke. Like, I don't really rate McKee's grappling much, but he's decent as a striker. He'll throw in combination, and he's extremely long. And he's a lot longer than Morono is. He's 78-inch reach versus Morono 72. He's 3 inches taller. The problem is he doesn't really use it very well. It's very easy for guys to close distance against him. And, the closest comp I could find to Morono when looking at tape here was Perry Goodwin, who also has that kind of weird and sporadic movement that Morono has. And he was getting inside of McKee pretty easy and landing pretty heavy. And so with that in mind, it's like a plus 200 I might be interested in McKee, but plus 160 less so. I pretty much think, Morono's got some defensive flaws, and McKee maybe could exploit them. But Morono's volume is likely going to be better. He's the better athlete. He's fought better competition. McKee doesn't do a great job of keeping distance. And so pretty much I kind of think maybe the line's a little wide, but not far enough that I think there's very much value here. And, ultimately, there's still a ton of question marks around McKee, whereas we know Morono at least is going to throw in a lot of volume. He can defend himself in the grappling. And outside of that fight with Williams, where, obviously he got knocked out, but he hasn't shown a ton of issues with durability. So it's a pass for me. Morono is my pick. I can't hate on anybody for playing McKee. I just haven't seen enough to trust him yet. Move on. We got Ashley Yoder, Miranda Granger. See anything here?
No.
Luke?
I was waiting for the pass. No. Yeah, I didn't do a 3-0 for me this week, but if there was a fight in there, I would probably throw this one in there. Ultimately, I'm not very high on either girl. And I've always I've wanted to give Ashley Yoder more credit. Like, I've just tried to find all these reasons to give Ashley Yoder more credit. I mean, she's obviously a girl who comes from a jiu-jitsu background, who has, shown to at least improve her hands a little bit in recent years. And, she's going to throw. But my big issue with her is that there just aren't these big moments in her fights. Like, when we're talking about on the feet, she'll have some success, but she'll also concede and start going backwards. So from an optics standpoint, that doesn't necessarily look great, even if she's landing on the ground. We've seen her get into dominant positions, but we've also seen her be more of one of these submission over position type of girls. So she will lose that. So even attacking from bottom, how does that optically look? That varies from judge to judge, per se. It's kind of honestly a similar situation, not from a stylistic perspective, but from from one of her last fights against Livia Hinata Souza. We were talking about it last time, where we had plus 150 on Yoder, and we're going back and forth. I'm like, oh, Yoder's value at plus 150, but she just didn't do enough. And I just kind of feel like it's another one of those situations here where I just haven't seen her, really take the center for extensive periods of time on the feet. I just haven't seen her get extensive amounts of, or I should say amount of ground control. I haven't seen her submit a ton of girls in the UFC, despite that being her base. So at this point, I just don't really know how you can trust Ashley Yoder with your money. But it's another one of these fights. I think the line is very wide. I don't really understand all the Granger money coming in, but I'm not putting a cent on Ashley Yoder.
Yeah, I'm probably going to play Yoder, to be honest. I did not come into this week having any interest or intention in playing Ashley Yoder, because coming into the week when I started doing tape on it, it was minus 110 aside, which I mean seemed reasonable. Like I might have favored Yoder a little bit, but it's not a fight that I really was looking to get my money down in. But now, looking at the lines now, we're up to like Granger minus 150 in places, and like you look at the thing is, like, if Granger was some kind of an elite wrestler, I would obviously stay away. But I don't think she's even a particularly good wrestler. And in terms of jiu-jitsu, she's got some regional subs via armbar and whatnot. I don't think she's going to sub Yoder. Yoder is really the first girl she's faced that has the same frame and reach as her. And, when evaluating the stand-up, like, Granger seems okay against, like, regional cans. But, Yoder's fought real competition. And she's most of her fights, even though she's lost most of them, have been relatively close. And, she's fought, her fight with Dern. If Mackenzie Dern couldn't cover, she's not getting subbed here. Her fight with Hill, she lost it cleanly, but she didn't look bad. Same thing with the Justin Kish fight. She's just basically been fighting real competition, whereas Miranda Granger basically hasn't been fighting anybody. And so it's like one of those fights where, unless you're telling me Granger overnight developed some kind of an elite wrestling game, I don't see how this doesn't look 50-50-ish, like some kind of a high variant striking fight. And we saw Granger, when her head and arm throw didn't work, end up with Amanda Lemos on her back and get subbed in her last fight. Her fight before that, which was a straight kickboxing match pretty much with Hannah Goldie, and I don't rate Hannah Goldie much at all, was a pretty close fight. It's not like she's got, carrying a ton of power. And so I just don't, I don't like Ashley Yoder, but I don't really understand how a girl who's like a 6-fight UFC vet, who's consistently in close fights, is getting priced at plus 130 against a girl who's, let's be honest, looked below average at best today in the UFC. So yeah, I don't love the play. I don't love the spot, but I just don't really see any justification for the current line. I think minus 110 aside was fair. I think minus 120 Yoder would be fair. But to me, Granger has a lot to prove. Her game, it's a bit more Muay Thai based, but in terms of striking, I think it's pretty much around the same level of Yoder's, except we've actually seen Yoder have some effectiveness against real competition. And that, to me, is what it really comes down to, is Yoder's been facing real fighters, whereas, Granger's facing Hannah Goldie and Helosa Acevedo in CFFC.
He's legit, bro.
So I don't know. I think the line's kind of ridiculous. I expect it's going to be pretty 50-50 where someone bitches no matter what. But I'm probably going to end up on Yoder. I'm still watching it. I told Lags yesterday, if it hits plus 120, I'm betting it. Now we're at plus 130. I mean, am I going to get plus 150 by fight close? I don't know. But
I bet you will. I guarantee you will.
Yeah, I know, which is crazy. Like, how can you justify that? There's nothing in the tape to suggest that. So yeah, I think it's a high variance 50-50 fight. I'm probably going to end up on Yoder just because, yeah. Anyway, we move on. We got, what do we got next? We got Brent. Oh, here we go. The Club and Sub main event. We got Brendan Allen taking on Sean Strickland. See, what do you got for us here?
Yeah, I played Strickland for 3.5 units. I'm going to just try and fade Allen until it works. So eventually he's going to lose. But, yeah, I mean, Sean has good takedown defense. I think, outside of this Marshman fight, I mean, he just never looked to get the takedown. But I think he shows, pretty good fight IQ. And I think, I don't know, a lot of people seem to think that, like, Brandon Allen's, like, evolving or getting better. But, I mean, I don't know. Is there, like, an example of him really, like, showcasing, like, him evolving? I don't know. I mean, I don't really like his wrestling. I mean, he's athletic, but the guy's a fucking punching bag. And Strickland, like, genuinely has good takedown defense. And if he's stuffing takedowns, he's going to light Brandon Allen up on the feet. Even if it gets to the mat, I don't really think Brandon Allen's going to control him. Yeah, I mean, I think Strickland's like 70-30. Outside of, like, his injury and, like, being inactive, like, I just have a hard time seeing, like, the rationale of playing Allen at, like, evens here. I just don't think he's going to – I just don't really find him having much success. So I got 3.5 units in Strickland, and I'm also going to play some Strickland knockout, because Allen's getting knocked out at some point. I mean, the guy broke his, what did he do? Break his like orbital or something? He wasn't even supposed to fight this year.
Yeah, he fractured his orbital.
Right, and Dawkins was lighting his ass up on the feet. Kyle just kind of went full fucking retard. But if he kept that fight standing, it was pretty clear that he was going to win. As someone who backed Dawkins for fucking 4 units there, it's aggravating. So hopefully, I mean, honestly, hopefully I get this at some point. I faded him every single fight since the Contender Series through this. So we'll see.
Yeah, I'm pretty much with you, C. I'm willing to basically go out on my shield, Sparta style, fading Brendan Allen. It's either going to be him losing or my bankroll losing. But, yeah, I mean, look, I don't hate Brendan Allen. But I think like just the Dawkins fight, for example. Like, I've seen the same stuff, people talking about his evolution. I bet Dawkins that fight because I was expecting a super scrambly fight because Allen doesn't solidify position, and both guys would be scrambling, and maybe Dawkins wins it like that. And instead, we saw Dawkins, who's striking, I never particularly rated, lighting him up on the feet. Like, it was bizarre stuff, to be completely honest with you. And then, so it's like, I don't really understand. Like, look, I like how aggressive Allen is. I can't take that away from him. You know, the guy goes after it, and, you know, you'll beat some fighters just on that enthusiasm. But if you actually look at his time in the UFC, like the Holland fight, he's getting his ass absolutely handed to him for about 6 minutes, and then Holland just gasses out, and he finishes him. The Breeze fight, look, I'm a Tom Breeze fan, but I'd be hard to believe that Breeze didn't just quit that fight. You know, he literally had an underhook and just basically decided to show up and get finished. And then you look at, you know, his last fight with Dawkins, you know, basically the same thing. If he doesn't land that clinch knee that drops Dawkins in round 1, he loses that fight. And with Strickland, look, I said it on the pod last week, and I do feel this way. I did think Strickland looked a little wooden in his fight with Marshman, but Strickland looking wooden standing isn't going to matter against Brendan Allen. Like, whatever you say about him, Strickland's got legit talent, and he's, you know, his boxing is legit. He's not going to have any issue with Allen on the feet. In terms of defensive grappling, like, Strickland showed real resistance against Usman early in that fight. He got up twice against Usman. Usman only went 2 for 8 on takedowns there. You know, I have some concerns he could get stuck on his back because I've seen him just try to throw elbows off the bottom, which drives me nuts. But whenever he's tried to work up, he's gotten up no problem. And on the other side, you know, if he sweeps Allen, which we've seen Allen get swept out of mount like 5 or 6 times now, I'm not sure Allen is going to be able to reverse position against him. I just pretty much think Strickland is better basically at everything except like pure jiu-jitsu. Like, if I were to compare Allen to somebody, it would probably be like GM3. Like, I think that's a fair comparison. You know, he's not much of a striker. His jiu-jitsu is more crafty than it is like elite. Like, he's not to me and Maya. He's an okay wrestler, but nothing special. I just pretty much think unless Allen's turned some kind of a corner or Strickland just decides, okay, I'm going to throw elbows off my back for 15 minutes, he's got him covered pretty much everywhere here. You know, obviously Allen could pull out like one of those meme subs out of his back pocket, but I think it's going to be very much one-way traffic on the feet. I don't think Allen's going to have much ease getting him down, and I don't think if Strickland decides to just work up, he can hold him there. So I'm 2.5 units on it, -110 right now. Eddie Bryan just mentioned in the chat that the line's going the other way. I might increase it. Like, I really, again, like, I don't think Allen's like not UFC level. I just think he's kind of, you know, high rolled a couple outcomes in a row that have been somewhat fortunate. I played Heinisch last week, and I think Strickland, in terms of raw skill, is a much more skilled fighter than Allen is. Yeah, I don't disagree, Magic. Like, the guy, Strickland's fight IQ is somewhat suspect, but I just, you know, I think there's levels, and I think this is, you know, a perfect example of that. What do you think, Luke?
Well, to Magic's point, if he comes out there and shoots 15 takedowns against Brendan Allen, but does not shoot 1 against Jack Marshman, you will never see me on this podcast again. I will quit betting on mixed martial arts. Putting the stamp on that right now. So that's not happening, but that'd be hilarious. 2 big points for me here, at least in terms of Strickland, you know, Allen being aggressive. Well, Allen, as we have all touched on, you know, Allen's an absolute punching bag, whereas a guy in Sean Strickland, who I think just controls distance really well, even when he is tagged, he's one of those guys who I think just rolls with punches too. So being able to sit there and try to bowl a guy like Sean Strickland, I don't think that's even relevant in this matchup at all. I don't think that's happening as long as this fight's on the feet. I think Sean Strickland's picking him apart. And then in terms of the ground perspective, so let's say Allen does get takedowns, as you touched on, John. He's aggressive in attacking stuff, and Strickland is a brown belt as well. We have seen him reverse position. The only, I guess, issue I have is maybe a little bit in that Alex Garcia fight. He did get stuck on the bottom a little bit more than I'd like there, but I think that's only really one example of anything. And I think Alex Garcia, say what you want about the guy, wrestling is a little bit decent when he goes to it as well. And, I think he does have the ability to actually get up or reverse position in the worst case scenario that he is put on bottom here. So the fact that this fight's a pick'em is a little surprising to me. I actually moved in on a play today. I got 2 units on Sean Strickland at plus 100. The only reason I'm not playing this higher is actually to Edward's point that I could just be misreading this line wrong, and we just see a ton more of Allen's steam come in. And I don't want to sit there and be holding, potentially bad line if I'm able to even grab Sean Strickland at a better one. So I kind of scaled my unit size down right now. I'm fine with it if it spikes back on Strickland. If not, and I'm able to get more down on Strickland at a bigger dog price, that works for me too. I'm down to throw a half unit or even a unit more on Strickland. Still not sold on Allen. I think it's just kind of a bad matchup for him.
Yeah, I agree completely. And we move on to could be a fun fight depending on what Eric Anders decides to show up. We got Antonio taking on Eric Anders. What do you got here, Luke?
Yeah, this is actually the very first play I moved in on for this card. I got 1.5 units on Arroyo at plus 135. I've always been a big fan of you, boy. I love me some Eric Anders, but he, from a betting perspective, just a guy that's a bit frustrating to watch. And I think we can all kind of agree on that point. We've seen him shoot takedowns at sometimes. He's an aggressive guy, at least in going forward. Super durable. He's going to throw his hands, but he's going to take some shots too. In the big consideration in making this bet too is just based on when he's fighting kickers. It really just has not went well for Eric Anders in those particular scenarios. And we know Antonio Arroyo is going to come out and throw kicks. My one, I guess, to play devil's advocate against my own bet is I don't like how Arroyo doesn't punch enough. He's almost a little too kick reliant for my liking. But then once again, at the end of the day, we've also seen a little bit too much patience from Eric Anders, in my opinion. Like even going back to his last fight against Jocko, I think you guys had some Anders bets there.
Yeah.
It just didn't do enough. That fight was his for the taking, in my opinion, and he just didn't do enough. And a guy, once again, in Anders, who's very, very heavy on that lead leg. We have the different stance nature. I think that body kick is going to be there all day from Arroyo. I don't want to go too far to the Santos fight, because I believe he did take that on short notice too. Obviously different weight class and whatnot, but it was ultimately, those body kicks that really started beating him up. And then the dude couldn't even, answer the bell, I believe the 4th round. So it's another one of these fights where I'm not trying to lay my money necessarily on Eric Anders. It's not a spot where I'm super high on Arroyo per se, but I think he does present a stylistic consideration that has historically presented Eric Anders troubles, and Eric Anders just doesn't do enough for me. If Eric Anders comes out here and wrestles super heavy, which I will give him credit for, he has done at certain points, but I don't necessarily think you can bank on that based on historics. So I think plus number on Arroyo, and a guy who's going to throw some heat. I think he's going to have the bigger moments here. I think it's a solid dog play.
See, how about you?
I don't hate a play on Arroyo. I don't really like how he really just throws kicks. He doesn't throw his hands. But fucking Anders is a complete dumbass. I can't bet on Anders ever after the shit he pulled last time. And fuck that. I vaguely like it goes to distance. I don't mind that. Anders is a tough dude. He's a tough out. But yeah, I don't have a super strong opinion on this fight because I don't know what to make of Anders.
Yeah, I'm in a similar boat. So I've always kind of been an Anders truther. Like, the guy's obviously got athleticism. He's got surprisingly developed grappling for a guy who played football and hadn't ever performed in mixed martial arts. His gas tank's mostly been decent, but he throws absurdly low volume. Even though he goes forward, he never seems to want to engage. And when you want him to do one thing, he does the other. Like, I fucking bet him against Khalil Roundtree, and the guy doesn't attempt to takedown and just gets kicked to bits. Then I bet him against Chris Jocko because I'm like, okay, he's going to go throw it and throw hands. And all he tries to do is take down a decent defensive wrestler for the entire fight. Drives me nuts. So, like, I do have a play here. I'm not sure if I'm going to keep it or just trade it out for a couple bucks. But, like, I got a Hoya plus 140 when the rest of the market was around 125. I may keep it. Like, I'm just – because I do kind of agree with you, Luke. I just think pretty much against Anders, its activity is going to win fights. He lost to Elias Theodoro because Theodoro basically just kicked him.
Danced him, yeah.
And, like, to your point, I do think Anders could probably take a Hoya down here, and it's kind of a major concern of mine. But he doesn't really solidify position at all. Like, it's like you saw, for instance, and look, I'm not comparing Anders to Glover Teixeira, but Santos last weekend against Glover Teixeira, Santos has major weaknesses on the ground, and Anders got him down a bunch, in fairness to him. But Anders just doesn't have or hasn't displayed the ability to lock down position on the mat. And so we saw Arroyo get up against Andre Muniz. I'm inclined to think that Anders probably can't keep him on the mat. And with that in mind, I just kind of think – Anders has more power and he's got the come forward optics in his favor, but the guy is so unreliable to throw strikes. It's like, how are you lining this guy as a favorite against, Andrew's going to destroy the field in LFA. He already did that magic. But, like, how like, the guy doesn't warrant a minus 140 against, like, anybody at this point. And, like, I've bet him a bunch because I do think the talent is there, but he hasn't figured out, like, and you see this with guys, like, he basically, to me, he's the kind of guy who should have spent 15 fights regionally learning how to fight instead of fighting like 6 times in LFA and coming to the UFC. Because clearly, like, he has some of the tools necessary for mixed martial arts, but he does not know how to literally mix the martial arts. The guy, it's like when the guy gets in there, he has either one plan or another. Like against Jocko, after the first round, when the takedowns clearly weren't working, maybe let your hands go against one of the most chinny guys in the division. No. Against Roundtree, he just decided, I want to trade with a way better striker than me. It's just bizarre. So, yeah, I have a Hoya right now. I'm probably going to keep it, to be honest. I haven't, maybe if a lot of money comes in a Hoya, I'll trade it out. But, yeah, I think Anders is impossible to trust at this point, and I do like him. And so we move on. We got another fight that we're going to have some opinions on. We got Kay Hansen taking on Corey McKenna. C, take it away.
Corey's my girl. What's Kay priced at right now? I haven't looked today. She's
like 220, I think.
She's sitting at, where is this line?
It's like somewhere around 70%, right?
Yeah, it's minus 225.
Yeah. So my opinion on this is more just like, okay, for Kay to look, just in general, in WMMA, you have to have a pretty clear path to victory to look minus 2XX, right?
Yeah, for sure.
How does Kay Hansen look minus 200, let's say, versus Corey? Because, 1, I think Corey has better hands. 2, Corey has better wrestling. And 3, Kay probably has a slight edge, I guess, jiu-jitsu-wise. But as you've seen in the who's the fucking meme chick?
Demopoulos,
yeah.
Right. So Demopoulos, like, say whatever you want about her, but she's pretty aggressive grappler, and she's probably a better submission grappler than Kay Hansen, just overall. Like, I know people who have grappled Demo. I know that you're doing that, but I know people who grappled Demo, and like someone that I respect who thinks Demo's pretty good, and has grappled Kay. So just out of that, but just in general, like I just don't see how you could price Kay Hansen at minus 2XX unless you think that she's definitely getting a submission here. And like Corey's pretty smart. You know, she's pretty intelligent. She did get in some deep shit, but like she was very like she did everything right versus Demo, right? Like even though she was in some deep shit, like she did things that were correct. Like she has process. So like the way I see it is like if it does hit the mat, which it probably will, like I don't think that it's like any type of given that Kay's just like insta sub here. I could see Corey just grinding it out, and I do think Corey's better on the feet. So I just impossible for somebody to tell me that Kay Hansen's minus 200 here, like at 70%, unless you're gonna tell me with pretty high certainty that she's getting a submission. So the way I priced it was 60-40 Corey, and I put 2.5 units on her.
Yeah. I don't know if I priced it that high, but I mostly agree with you. And if you actually like go back, so look, these fights happen in terms of fight time a while ago, but in terms of real time, she fought Magdalena Sermova just over a year ago, and she got mounted 3 times in that fight. Basically, you know, she kept trying to go for those head and arm throws, and Sermova basically just kept putting her down and just dominated her on the mat. And, you know, which we see happen from time to time with wrestlers who haven't had to spend much time on the mat. We saw the same thing happen 2 years ago with Kai Schwartz, where basically Schwartz just out-physicaled her, put her on the ground, and beat her up and finished her. I'm not saying it's a given Corey does that here, but kind of to your point, C, I think Corey's kind of displayed at least, you know, responsibility in the grappling, both defensively and offensively. And I do think, you know, and we saw, it's not like she's cleaned up the head and arm throws. You know, Hansen tried it a couple times against Fry. If she tries it here, there's a decent chance Corey ends up on top of her. And I do think if that happens, now look, I'm not saying it's not possible she's made improvements, but if she hasn't, she's going to get controlled on top. In the boxing, you know, we saw, now look, Jinyu Fry is a better striker in terms of like technical striking than Corey McKenna, no question. But McKenna's a decent boxer, and I'd give her like a fairly substantial edge in terms of technical striking. So to me, the fight really comes down to, can Corey grind her out? Like, and you know, she could, but I do think she's a decent defensive grappler or a decent grappler just in general. And it's like, if that's true, and if she does provide basically even minimal resistance in the grappling or enough to get on top of her once or twice, it's almost impossible to justify Hansen at minus 200 here. I personally think the opener, like Hansen minus 125, is more about like where this should be, just because I do think, you know, Hansen's probably the better athlete, and, you know, we know she's going to go for her best path to victory. I just don't see, especially with the unknowns here, and like we've seen McKenna not be afraid to grapple with good submission grapplers before. I think they're too much to justify this line. And like I said, I'm pretty confident that unless something is massively changed, if McKenna gets on top of her, she's not getting up. So I played McKenna as well. I played her for 1 unit at plus 194. But yeah, I completely agree. I think minus 200 doesn't make much sense at all. What do you think, Luke?
So this is the only fight on the card that I have not fully taped yet. So I guess take my slight opinion with a grain of salt, but I've always been a Kay Hansen truther. I guess my one question is, as once again, being the guy who has not fully researched it yet, I guess what happens if Kay Hansen gets into top position? I'm not saying that she should be minus 220, because obviously McKenna, super tough girl, but I think just after watching her career, I think Kay Hansen has made a lot of improvements. Once again, I'm not saying she should be minus 220 here. Once again, I need to look into this one a little bit more. But I'm just curious to see, I guess, what happens if Kay Hansen gets in top position here. Maybe that justifies the price.
No, you're 100% right about that. I guess my point is more like we haven't seen like there's with both for sure.
Yeah,
you know, right. But like one of them is minus 200 and one of them is not.
And Kay will play from her back too.
Right.
Yeah, that's one of the reasons why I think Corey should be a slight favorite.
I don't hate it.
Like, I don't think Corey's just going to fight from her back and just be comfortable in guard where Kay will be.
Well, yeah. I mean, I think that's the big unknown here. Like, it could happen. I just more think there's, you know, significant questions on both sides, but when there's significant questions on both sides and one's plus 194,
take the dog.
yeah, especially to that degree, it doesn't really make a ton of sense to me. But anyway, we move on. Another fun fight where I'm on another big dog here. We got dogs all night. We got a Julian Marquez, the Cuban Missile Crisis, taking on Safarov. I actually played Safarov here. I played him from 1 unit plus 250. I pretty much think, like, look, I actually don't hate Marquez's game completely. Like, he obviously hits hard. He's a reasonable defensive grappler from his back. Like, he seems to know what to do to get up. But we haven't really seen that much from him in the UFC. The guy's shown a willingness to get into absolute wars for absolutely no reason when he hasn't had to. He dropped the fight to Alessio Di Chirico. Phil Hawes, look, whatever, like, I'm not the biggest Phil Hawes fan, put him in serious danger early before he completely gassed out. I just think, against a guy like Safarov, who, again, I don't think is particularly skilled, Safarov is going to come forward. He is going to spam volume, and Safarov's going to attempt takedowns in volume. And, we've seen Marquez does not have the best grappling ever. And I'd expect Safarov to land takedowns. I think Safarov hits reasonably hard. He dropped John Vellante, who's not particularly chinny. And so it's like, it's very much, I think, if you're playing Marquez, it's based off of, a couple fights that happened a couple of years ago. He's been hurt. We're talking about a fight where it's going to be a high volume, and Marquez is generally not a super high volume guy. But, even if Safarov can't get the grappling going, it's going to be two guys trading bombs in the pocket. Would I favor Marquez in that kind of a fight? Yes, probably. But do I favor him to a minus 300 degree? No, not at all. And like when you combine the fact that Safarov has seemed pretty durable and he's pretty tough and is probably going to land takedowns, I struggle to see how in a fight where we know both guys are willing to get into wild exchanges in the pockets and one guy can land takedowns, how you price Marquez better than minus 150 here. So to me, it's like Safarov has the grappling upside. He's probably got knockout upside since they're probably both going to land heavy. I think he's at least 40%, and so I'm on him for plus 250. What do you think, Luke?
I don't hate it, man, because I think these guys were booked to fight before, right?
Yeah.
And I think, just going off of memory, I think from my original breakdown, I think I took Safarov too. I don't think I bet him. But originally I was like, oh, these guys are going to be these two big dudes going to come out here, just chuck strikes. Pretty defensively flawed. Under 1.5 looks like a good spot, but I think a potential sneaky good play that I have not pulled the trigger on yet is the over 1.5. I think that actually might be a sneaky good play because conventional wisdom is Safarov does not defend strikes. Marquez does not defend strikes. Both guys throw heat. Marquez gives his back. Safarov gets takedown. Safarov gets submitted. Under 1.5 all day, like literally anything we've ever seen just speaks under 1.5. Honestly, I think the over 1.5 might have some value here, though. I think both guys have shown to be relatively tough. Like even in the times that Marquez has gotten his back taken, I think he's shown good defensive responsibility in terms of fighting hands and clearing hooks and whatnot. And I think both guys have been in some bad spots. Obviously Safarov more so in terms of the grappling upside or the grappling downside of Rodolfo Vieira, but hashtag no shame there getting submitted by Rodolfo Vieira. Guy's a freaking animal. But honestly, I think it's a fight that actually hits the over 1.5 at a decent clip. Just one of these high violence type of fights where I'm picking Safarov. I'm still not sold on Marquez, but my potential play consideration here is the over.
The one thing I'll say about Marquez is you can never forget he beat the GOAT, Matt Hamill. See, what do you got here?
Is this the co-main event?
No. That's next.
Oh, yeah. I didn't research any of this thing, but doesn't this guy have a podcast with Kendra Lust?
Yeah, Julia Marquez does, I think.
Yeah, interesting stuff.
Bless his soul.
Yeah, no, I have not researched it. Oddly enough, like my book only puts out, like your local guy might just put out like a week in advance.
Yeah.
Or like the couple championship fights, like he's been hanging like fucking Perez and Figueiredo for fucking, like a month. For some reason this fight's been hanging for like 2.5 months. I'm like, why is this like the only line for this card for like 2 months in advance?
When was this originally booked? What was the first
summer,
date?
I think it was over the most anticipated fight in MMA for the last 3 months.
The books just didn't remove it at all.
So, I always like log onto my phone to see like when the new lines come up, and I'm like, why the fuck is this up here? Like a month and a half up. Anyway, yeah, no opinions. I haven't looked at it.
All right, we got Abdul Razak Alhassan taking on Chaos Williams. See, you got an opinion here?
Oh, I didn't look into this one either.
All right, Luke, you got an opinion?
Not a strong one. I guess it's kind of one of these scenarios where you got two relatively decent hitters. Obviously, Williams has been able to win some more fights on the cards, but I'm kind of looking to target the under 1.5 here. Razak Alhassan is one of those guys who's just a bit of an anomaly. Granted, I said that last time against Lazez, and I know a few sharp people, no pun intended, sniped Lazez, at that plus 300 or whatever number. I guess I was more concerned about him having a little bit of that tall man's defense where he's kind of doing the lean back thing. But hey, man, that turned out to be a super sharp play. Whereas I just think, Chaos Williams is going to bring chaos, which I think also just gives credence to Alhassan's game. So despite him never being finished, I think the under 1.5 might have a decent amount of value. Just with Alhassan, like I said, being kind of that anomalous type guy, your Derek Lewis type of guy. You can only cap these guys' fights so differently. But who knows? Maybe Williams impresses, but even with Alhassan's recent loss, he's just a wild man. So it's not really a fight I'm overtly trying to be invested in from a side, but I might lean the under, but we'll see. No official plays yet.
These Freitas suck, huh?
What was that?
Freitas, they kind of suck.
They're not great.
This year, they were killing it in 2019. 2019, they killed it.
Saeed seems like a really good coach, but like they all seem like they're like
bunch of head cases.
They're like too good for like LFA and like that stage, but they're like just not good enough for like the UFC. Maybe like borderline like decent Bellator. Like they're just confused. I don't understand.
Yeah, it's because 2019 they had Alex Morono fighting Max Griffin. That was, but yeah, I don't have a play here, and I don't think I will, just because that was concerning against Lazez, and kind of like what Magic said, I am a little bit worried we get calculated Alhassan here. But
that would be a fucking nightmare. That would be like peak 2020, bro. Just calculated point fighting Razak Alhassan. Like, kill me, bro.
It's worth mentioning that Chaos Williams was plus 350 against Alex Morono.
Yeah. Less
than a year ago. There is a reason for that. I do sort of think that there is probably value on Alhassan. I don't really want to play it after he's going to use his judo and just take it down. I don't really want to have involvement with it. But I do think, I think the most likely outcome here is they both walk into the middle and bang, or Williams maybe tries to cage push him to avoid, the power, and it turns into an ugly Alhassan decision. Like, it is worth mentioning, even though he gassed himself against Lazez, I know he lost the fight, but he fought Omari Akhmedov, and his cardio actually looked pretty good deep into that fight. And I do think he's reasonably skilled. Like, it's not just power. Not that I think he could climb the rankings very high, but he does have some decent judo trips, and it seems like a reasonably skilled defensive grappler. I just kind of think he's better than Chaos Williams everywhere. And like I said, unless what Magic says happens and we get Alhassan staring at him for 15 minutes, I do think he's probably the value side, but I don't really want to play him at minus 230 in case that happens. Or I mentioned on that pod, and I bet Lazez live that if I see Lazez tank the damage, I'm going to hit him immediately. Like, what if he goes crazy and it turns out Chaos Williams can just eat the shots, and then we see a repeat where Alhassan's just eating damage for 15 minutes. I don't know. Like, it's just not something I want to be a part of, but I think Alhassan's probably the side personally. Main event, and this is going to be a lot more exciting than the one we had originally booked. We got Rafael dos Anjos taking on Paul Felder. Luke, you got an opinion here?
Honestly, not overtly strong, at least from a betting perspective. I was kind of hoping we were going to get a better line on Dos Anjos personally, but we kind of obviously saw that money creep in. Yeah, honestly, not a really in-depth take here. I think, right around, that minus 266%. I think that makes sense for Dos Anjos. Obviously, Felder's coming in short notice. Dude's a massive 155's got to cut a ton of weight. But I guess my real consideration here in this fight, which I think makes it just a tad interesting, is do we see Dos Anjos wrestle? I think he should. That makes obviously 100% sense. But in terms of historics, we haven't seen it a ton from him historically, but to give at least some credit to Dos Anjos, that also gives credence to some of the matchups, the Kevin Lees, the Kamaru Usmans, the Colby Covingtons. Obviously, it makes sense why, some of that stuff hasn't added up. But, his even outside of that, historically, he's not a guy who's necessarily diving on legs for 15 minutes. But at the same time, obviously, his striking is very good too, but obviously that's where, Paul Felder thrives, in those big pocket exchanges, as even still a relatively stationary guy, obviously a tough guy. I still think the counter game of Dos Anjos is better than Felder. So I'd like him to get the job done here, but I was kind of hoping we were going to get let's get some nice, late lean to Paul Felder. Hey, he's coming in on short notice. Let's get some money moving on him there, and maybe scoop Dos Anjos up at minus 140 or something. But unfortunately, we don't get that, and I think the line's kind of correct price or priced correctly, I should say. So I like Rafael to get it done.
Yeah, I mostly agree with you. I was thinking the same thing. Felder seems to be a guy that the Twitterverse absolutely loves. Coming off a really exciting fight that was really close with Dan Hooker that a lot of people thought he won, and Dos Anjos off a bunch of losses. Instead, we get the line where it is, and I kind of agree with you. Minus 190 right now. Maybe you could be above minus 200 or so. I guess my issue with Dos Anjos at the current line, I actually think I'd play him at minus 150 to be honest. My issue with the current lines, I guess, where is he? He looked pretty bad against Chiesa, but he's also a year removed from basically being competitive in the striking numbers at distance with Leon Edwards. I pretty much
and not to cut you off real quick, John. I mean, just even that Chiesa matchup, just very different stylistics too.
Yeah, and I guess my point is Dos Anjos in his prime, 5 years ago, I probably have minus 300 or minus 350 against Felder. I like Felder as a commentator. He seems like a great guy. I appreciate the fact that the guy seems to have optimized his style, which is basically just come forward, be tough, and kind of break people by being basically a poor man's Justin Gaethje kind of. But the reality is the guy's not a very efficient striker. He absorbs strikes at a greater rate than he lands them. He doesn't. I think he only defends strikes at 49%. He's very easy to land on. He's not particularly high output himself, in addition to being very hittable, which isn't a great combination. And even in terms of his finishing ability, it's never been particularly high. He hasn't finished many fights at the UFC level, and so he's always just kind of a guy that I feel is kind of gotten by on guile and toughness. Whereas Dos Anjos, at his peak was extremely skilled, and even now I still think is fairly skilled. I think he mostly has him covered everywhere in the striking. And to your point, Luke, I think if he's got the gas for it at this stage and he just decided to wrestle him, I think he could wrestle fucking with fairly easily, to be honest. But there is the beer Yoder just mentioned it. We saw, and the Chiesa fight is different. But, we went from seeing him popping up 12 times after getting taken down by Kamaru Usman to suddenly accepting guard on his back against Chiesa, which was, very different. Now, I don't know if that was just, he was tired. I don't know what was going on and what caused that, but it was certainly concerning. So with that in mind, I wouldn't price him up in the minus 300 range. But I still do think until we see the striking completely fall off, whatever, I know Edwards is somewhat of a controversial figure. Leon Edwards is very legit. The fact that he was basically even with him at distance, I mean, speaks volumes. So I think where Dos Anjos is at, like, I don't think, look, obviously they're different weight classes, but I think he's levels above Felder in striking and pretty much everywhere. But the age is a concern, and we've seen Felder perform at a high level more recently than Dos Anjos. So, yeah, I agree the line's more or less right. Something I do think is pretty interesting that I'm thinking about playing is FanDuel currently has, and I guess Betfair too if you're overseas, currently has a 4-5 decision at plus 110. Yeah, Lags just mentioned it, which I think is like pretty good. Like, I think Dos Anjos' power and finishing ability has pretty clearly decreased. Like, it's been a long time since he's hurt somebody standing. Even Lawler's corpse, who he fought, basically he wasn't really hurting him. And so I think that's pretty interesting. See, Felder, the only time he's been finished in his career was from a cut against Trinaldo. So I don't think it's likely at all he knocks him out, nor do I think it's particularly likely that he finishes him. And if it does happen, it would probably be late via like leg kicks and attritional work. So, yeah, in terms of how I see the fight going, I think it's going to be mostly fairly low volume with Dos Anjos just winning the majority of exchanges. And if he chooses to wrestle, having a massive edge there. But yeah, I favor him, pretty much to where the line is. I think that 4-5 decision line is pretty good, though. So no play at the moment. Leaning towards that, though, I can't hate on anybody for taking the shot at Dos Anjos. If we saw a little more life in his body against Chiesa, I probably would be here, to be honest. Like, I do think he's the superior fighter in just about everywhere. So, yeah, Eileen RDA, he's my pick. At 4-5 decision, I think is pretty interesting, and I might take a stab at it. C, I guess, will not be popping back in. But I know
main event prediction from C.
I know C likes RDA as well. He said that he heard from somebody he knows that Felder basically has done literally no sparring or anything in preparation for this. He's basically just hit pads. So, which is interesting. But anyway, guys, thanks for coming out tonight. We're going to possibly leading towards it, and I'll put something out on Twitter tomorrow if it becomes official, doing another live stream this weekend if you guys want to jump in. We had a lot of fun last weekend. Got a bit rowdy. We lost a under bet. Thanks, Luke, on the Barcelos under. But yeah, it was a lot of fun. We had a good crowd. So if you guys want to stop by, we're probably going to do that this weekend again, and probably for 255. So thanks for joining us. I should have mentioned at the start of the show, I need to start doing this, but if you like the show, just please drop a like and subscribe. It would help us a lot. And yeah, thanks for coming out, guys. As usual, I'm your host, John Stargarian MMA. You can find me on Twitter at MMA Fox with Luke at SWR_betting. Thanks for coming out, guys. Take it easy.